So today on the podcast, I'm joined by a man that is part of a band that sold 5 million records worldwide, no less. He's the lead singer of the band Wheatus. His name is Brendan Brown, and thank you, Brendan, for joining me today. How are you?
Thank you, sir, for having me. I'm feeling okay. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Yeah. So I suppose, what have you been up to during these times?
Well, I've been mixing the record, and if I turn the camera here a little bit, you'll see all the gear that I'm kind of working on at the moment. Which the 2020 20th anniversary edition of our first album. Obviously, COVID has thrown us off of the plan a little bit, but we finished Teenage Dirtbag back in April and got that out, and that turned out to be a good test case because we had to go back and forth with Sony, who placed a claim on it almost immediately. And the thing is, it's a new master. It's not the original master. We had to recreate it from scratch because the original, we don't think it exists anymore. We're fairly certain that it doesn't. So, we wound up working the better part of, I guess, about 2 years on getting not just a re-record, but a duplicate of the original, sort of like as close as we could possibly get. Having avoided a few mistakes here and there that we made back then when we were, 20, 25, 26, 27 years old, and it was sort of the test case for the rest of the album. Let's see if we can do Dirtbag over again. If we can get it right, we'll do the rest. And we're in the process of doing that now. And the other thing is our first record had 10 songs on it, but this one is going to have 20 because we kind of pulled the old tape boxes out of the closet and found a bunch of demos from back in the day that kind of felt like they belonged on the first album, and that's the reason that they were shelved, because they were kind of that feeling. So we started polishing them off and finishing them up, and we wound up with an extra 12, I think. So we're going to keep 2 for extras, but there's going to be the final version of the 2020 reissue is going to be 20 songs.
And so those songs were written around the time of that first album.
They were kind of written along the way after somewhere between, like shortly after, I'd say 2003, 2004, 2005, that period. And we didn't think that they belonged with what we were working on at the time because they were like, nah, that's kind of old ground, that's first album-y stuff, So we just put them aside and didn't think about it until now. I think it was a few years ago. Matthew was like, we're going to re-record this thing. What are we going to do for B-sides? Because the originally Punk Ass Bitch and the cover song, A Little Respect, those are 2 songs I didn't write. And the bass player who wrote Punk Ass Bitch is no longer with the band, so we didn't want to put that material on the reissue. And it was like, well, what are we going to do? And I was like, well, let's see, let's take a look at what we have. And we kind of did a few rummage runs through the closets and the old cardboard boxes and stuff, and we found a ton of stuff. I didn't think it was even in there, but we did. So now I'm stuck in this basement mixing 20 songs, singing 20 songs, playing 20 guitar tracks, and so on and so forth. So with the pandemic happening, it's made it very difficult because we record the old school way. We're in the same room, so we have to be together for that, and it's close quarters. And of course, it's loud, so it's not ventilated because the whole neighborhood would hear it. So we're in this position where we're kind of having to piece it together now, and it's quite delayed. So I think I'm on. I have 4 or 5 more songs to sing, and we have about 15 more to mix, or maybe 12 more to mix, I should say. So, but we're going to start releasing them in pairs, like we did with Teenage Dirtbag in April. We're going to do these song pairs. So, first one is Teenage Dirtbag and a song called Mope. It's like the original album and then the Lost Songs series, So that's up on Spotify right now, Teenage Dirtbag 2020. Actually, yesterday it knocked A Little Respect off of this number 2 slot on our Spotify, so it's climbing So we hope it makes sense for people to check out the new version. We worked really hard not to sort of dishonor the original. We wanted to make it, if anything, a little bit clearer, a little bit more open and big sounding. So we shot for that. You be the judge.
Yeah. And that's one thing I wanted to talk to you about, putting out music these days, in terms of streaming platforms and things like that. Over here, there was a news story last week. Gary Newman, famous artist, he released a song, Cars, if you remember, and he said that song got over 2 million hits on Spotify last year, and he got £36 for it. Like in the world, the way it is with music online, would it be fair to say that bands and musicians need to be on the road to make a living these days?
Yeah. The simple answer is yes. I would say that there are other ways. Everybody's having to improvise and innovate their own little path towards connecting with people who are interested. But I would say that the cool thing about it is, unlike back in the day when it was record labels and MTV and radio who were the purveyors of art that way, you can make your own. Everybody can customize their own path, so their own distribution, their own sort of like little culture of the way that they do things online. So that's pretty exciting, actually, because it makes it more diverse and less sort of controlled by gatekeepers and so on. So I would say that there's an opportunity there. At the same time, it's immensely confusing and sort of like, holy shit, what do I do? Like, if you're a new artist now, in some ways, I think it might be a little bit easier to be a new artist because you can just start fresh. But if you were like from our period and you find yourself adapting to like this new environment, it can be a little tricky, I think. But we got lucky because we got off of the record label early. We lost that connection in 2003. We got off of Sony. So we've been independent ever since, and we've always been innovating ways to communicate with people. But I think everybody kind of has to find their own way, which is good and scary.
It's nice in a way, I suppose, that you're your own boss and you don't have to put something to a record label. You can make kind of whatever you want and put it out there.
Yeah, which we have done. We haven't had anybody telling us what kind of record to make since the second album. We didn't even have that on the first one. We did get a lot of advice on the second one from the label. It was a lot of information about what they didn't like, and not a lot about what they did. And not that you can do that way anyway, but that's always been part of our thing. Is just like, you have to do it your way, because the real reason for that isn't because you're some kind of crazy rebel or you're breaking all the rules or any shit like that. The real reason is because when you stand on stage to sing a song, the only way that the audience can really connect, that you can connect with them, is if they believe it. And if it's not authentic, if it didn't come from you, if it's somebody else's idea, or it's your idea but it's compromised, it's really hard to be genuine and sing it on stage,
Yeah, you see a lot of bands go down that avenue with records. I'm not going to mention any of them, but like you'd see bands release, they've been signed to this label, and they come out with a song and it's completely different to anything they've ever done before.
Yeah, that's an old school music industry thing that's made its way all the way into our current, lives. But I've always found that very difficult to do. I've never succeeded, to be perfectly honest. I've never succeeded at that. Specifically, I mean, doing something a record label asks you to do, or A&R asks you to do, or producer even. We've never had a producer. We've always been self-produced. So, and the bands that I looked up to, Ani DeFranco and Fugazi and Rush, Willie Nelson, Public Enemy. These are all artists who, they cut new ground. They did their own thing. They didn't have any kind of committee of business people trying to help them sell records. And a lot of those people who work at labels have good intentions. They think, oh, if I can just get the producer in touch with the right artist and get something going. And some of them really knew what they were doing. Jimmy Iovine is one of those people who kind of like, he's a real music person. But by and by, the commerce and the capitalism of the music business loses touch with what's happening in, like, interesting culture movements, because they become influenced by their own success. This is the old story, so they wind up telling a new artist to do something that's really kind of like rotten and weak, and they, I'm sure that they've ruined a few careers that way. Yeah. Certainly more than they've made, so yeah.
In terms of tour life compared to what you're doing now, writing, mixing, being in the studio, which do you prefer of the two?
If everything's clicking, I prefer to be on the road. I like working in the studio, and if I'm on the road for 9 months or whatever, I come to a place where I want to be home. I want to be in the studio. I want to get my coffee whenever I want to have it and bring it into the studio and get hyped up and find something new in the gear behind me, make it do a new trick,
yeah.
But the camaraderie really is what's missing, whether it's in the studio or on the road. Not being able to talk to people, music is something that you do. It's not even a communication. It's more like almost like a metabolic or a chemical sink. Like you wind up in rhythm and harmony with other human beings, and the idea is to get so good at it that you can kind of read each other's minds, and that you're in each other's heads in the best of ways, and you have that I don't know, that sort of unity with each other over this piece of sort of math that the universe has in it, because that's all music really is, just linear mathematics of some kind or another. And you're kind of like discovering it at the same time and learning the equations together and solving them together, and you're kind of together is the only way that you can discover this thing about the universe that's already there. I was having this conversation with my girlfriend Gabrielle, who's a songwriter as well. She was playing me this piano piece, and I was just kind of meditating on the fact that, like, the numbers of music, the physics of music exists in this universe, in this environment. And we're born and we learn to interpret it, and some of us are better at it than others. But the fact of the matter is that it remains when we die. This math is still there. It's part of the physics of molecules and everything. So and vibration. So we come for this time, and we're allowed to, if we wish, kind of tinker with the mathematics and see if we can make it do something it has never done before. And all the possibilities will always exist. And then you die, but that equation you made can remain, and be a reference to other humans. It's pretty interesting. It's not like a statue. It's something more, I don't know, in the physics of life,
Yeah. Once you put something out there, your legacy will kind of always be there.
Well, yeah. The thing is, like, depending on how you feel about what death is, it's not so much your legacy. It's like a discovery, right?
Yeah.
I watched a film this morning while I was eating breakfast called The Dig with Ray Fiennes. Really interesting film about, it's a true story about one of the Anglo-Saxon treasure discoveries that happened during World War II on the British Isle in Suffolk, I think. And it's not just a nerdy kind of archaeology movie. It's a meditative question on what does it mean to exist and then to not exist, and then your relics are here still, and music goes beyond a physical thing. It's not a piece of gold. It's not a ship that was carved. It's not a sword or anything like that. It's this like idea. It's a mathematical idea that can be preserved now digitally, right? So
yeah,
literal math, like math, So yeah, I think we could, without getting too trippy about it. Music is weird. Music is weird.
In terms of you guys on the road, like, what are some of the you find like best countries outside of, say, the United States and Canada for you guys to play in?
My favorite place to play has always been Scotland. A close second would be Wales. We've had good shows in Ireland. Northern Ireland holds the sort of the crown for the coolest show we ever played at a youth center in Newry, which was brilliant. Oh my God, if I could play that show every day of my life, that would be the one. It was just these kids who weren't used to shows coming through, and we set up at a youth center. They were, most of them, I came to find out sort of as we were loading in, that a lot of them were orphans because of the troubles, you know.
Okay.
So you know, it was a really intense experience at the same time that it was like the funnest, stupidest time we've ever had, you know. It was just utterly joyful, like silly, you know.
Yeah, because Newry is a pretty small place, like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll never forget, we walked around the corner and we got this lamb stew that this woman was making at a little sort of kiosk. And it was better than anything I've ever had in a fine restaurant anywhere. It was like, okay, so two checks: best food, best show, Newry. Unexpected, but true.
Irish stew.
Yeah, the best.
I seen a video of you guys in the Grand Social. I think it's from maybe a year or two ago as well.
Sure.
And I think it's got a couple of million hits anyway. It's of you guys.
Does it really?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. It's like when you type in Teenage Dirtbag into YouTube, I think it's maybe the second or third thing that comes up. Yeah.
Was that in Cork?
No, the Grand Social was in Dublin.
Okay, right. Sorry, because I know that there was we did a show in Cork in a tiny little place, and there was a video from that got quite popular. But I thought you were talking about that one. But the Grand Social. I'm used to playing. We usually play Whelan's in Dublin, but the Grand Social. I remember I had to meet everybody late there because I was doing television that night. And I was real late. I was driving across. The poor cab driver was bringing me across Dublin at peak rush hour to try and get me to this other show. So I unfortunately, Grand Social I don't remember walking into it because I was just like head down, get me on the stage, you know, that kind of a moment. I didn't have a chance to connect with the venue because I usually do. We usually chill out with the staff for a few hours really, and get to know the place, you know, get to know what kind of crowd shows up and all that stuff. So I'll have to do that next time at the Grand Social.
Were you guys did you have tours lined up before all this hit?
We did. We had a ton of touring lined up. We had looked like we were going to be on the road for maybe 250 dates or something like that. It was going to be insane.
Jesus.
And you know, bummer, but we're all kind of trying to figure out what's going to happen instead now, you know.
Yeah.
Sure.
Do you think there's going to be a reluctance from people to go into crowded venues, like having this discussion over here as well? Like I love going to gigs. I can't wait to go to gigs. Just get me into them, you know.
I feel the same way, but we're kind of weird, you know. Your average person has to save up to go to a gig. The money is precious, of course, you know, and they have choices they can make about where to spend it. And I think that to some degree there will be a little bit of nervousness about being in crowds again, if for no other reason. We no longer know how to do it. Like we've been took such a break from doing that. So, but I think that once everybody has had the vaccine for a few months and the cases, I expect that the numbers of that drop off when the cases start dropping off after the vaccine has been out for a minute. That will reassure folks that it's working, you know, because you can know that it's working for you, but unless you see that there's, you know, the positivity rates go like in the States right now, we have it's about 4,000 people a day dying.
Yeah.
And when that number is much closer to zero, I think people will feel better about going out and doing stuff.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't be surprised to see it take a little while. Sure.
Yeah. So obviously we'll talk about Teenage Dirtbag. When you made that song, did you think it would be as big as it was?
Oh no.
Or was that, when you were looking at the album, was that just another track on it, or did that one stand out to you from the rest?
No, it was another song, but it also kind of stood out in a way that, like, I knew that it was perhaps the most concise narrative of the songs on that I had written to that point, and I also knew that it was sort of catchy. But I had been through a few record deals by that time with other projects, and I knew that having a hit was just as dangerous or more dangerous than not having one, because you could really get screwed up. And I was its success live and the way that people responded to it positively was right off the bat. But if anything, all it did was kind of make me a little nervous, because I thought, okay, well, I thought it was good, and now other people think it's good, and oh boy, like, now I have to, like, protect it. There are all kinds of ways for you to lose your publishing, lose access to the payment that you deserve from having written a song as the creator. So I knew that. I was well aware of all that stuff, and I was sort of like real sort of prickly about who to show it to and who to deal with, who to partner with on everything. Yeah. So I did know, but it was scary.
How did it end up in the movie then as well? Because that obviously coincided with the music video.
I only heard that Amy Heckerling, the director, she's fantastic. She wanted it. That's what I was told. That's what I heard. And when I found that out, I said yes, because I knew who she was. But I don't know who made the connection initially. I don't know information about that. I never found out.
Yeah. I seen a video of you over here in Ireland recording Teenage Dirtbag Oscuelga in Irish. Indeed. How did that come about?
The boys just reached out to me. I was is it Owen who
Owen McDermott, yeah.
Yeah, Owen McDermott. He got an email and communicated a little bit back and forth, and suddenly they were there in my studio in Long Island, and he coached me through it phonetically. Of course, I don't speak Irish, so
yeah.
But my grandmother did, and I was told, actually, she grew up in Roscommon, and I was told that it was her first language, which is interesting.
It's in the west of Ireland. It's very common in the west of Ireland.
Sure. So I never met her. Unfortunately, she died when my father was quite young. So it's an interesting, weird kind of like cosmic thing to be phonetically coached on your grandmother's first language this way. And they did a great job. They taught me how to sing it in Irish, really.
Yeah. And it was very interesting.
Yeah, it was fun. It was a challenge, and it was also I was sort of nervous about, don't make a mockery of this, take it very seriously, but at the same time have no meaningful connection with what you're saying. It's difficult, But
it sounds like when you're listening to it, especially I'd say if someone from outside of Ireland heard it, they must think it's just so weird.
Yeah. Well, I listen to it from time to time, and I love it. I think it's cool. I think it's like, I don't know. Does it get played around over there?
I haven't heard it. I assume that Owen played it on the radio, but I actually don't listen to the radio that much. He's got a radio show over there.
Sure.
Over here, like, so.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people only listen to the radio now when they're in the car, and I don't drive, so my source of watching music is probably YouTube, Spotify.
Right.
But
Of course.
I actually didn't even know about it until I asked you guys to do the podcast, and I was just looking up. I'm just look up a few clips now from Ireland, and I seen this come up, and I was like, wow, I didn't even know.
Yeah.
'Cause that was a good few years ago now.
Yeah, it was a bit, but I'm real glad we got a chance to do that. It was special.
Yeah.
And meant a lot.
In terms of the future, then, so the remastered album is coming out, and a few B-sides with that.
Not remastered, re-recorded from scratch.
Re-recorded.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The original masters are actually gone. They were on a transitional format in the late 90s and the early 2000s. It was rare to record on a computer. Pro Tools and Logic weren't quite there yet for our level, which was sort of consumer aspiring to be a professional.
Yeah.
So we went with what was available at the time, were these digital tape decks that they had, and they're long gone. Nobody uses them anymore. They only lasted that little window of like to transition from analog tape to digital computer. There was this digital tape hybrid, So I don't think they were ever backed up to Pro Tools properly, and hence they're not. Dirtbag never being in Rock Band until now, which it is. Our new version, Dirtbag 2020, is in Rock Band. But we're just recreating something from scratch there. Yeah.
Yeah. And then obviously when all this passes, you're hoping to get back on the road over to Europe again?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I can't wait. I mean, we had Australia planned. We had a whole big tour of America planned. All of Europe. We were going to try and hit South Africa again. Of course, the UK and Ireland. We're hoping for the first time ever. We've never been to Japan, so we were kind of like hoping we could figure out how to do that too.
Yeah, I had Billy Gray on from the band Fozzy. I don't know if you know them.
Yeah.
Chris Jericho's band.
Chris Jericho's band.
Yeah. And I asked him, I was like, is there anywhere that you haven't played that you want to play? And that's what he said, Japan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That is the golden ring of places to play. It sort of is, yeah.
People are just so into their music over there.
Mm. Yeah.
Well, it was great to catch up with you.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me.
And I really appreciate your time.
No, I appreciate you reaching out and having us on. I appreciate that a lot.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We'll see you in Ireland soon, hopefully.
You will, indeed. Within the year.
Thanks, Brendan.
Yeah, thank you, brother. Take care.
No bother.
If you enjoy the content on our channel, we'd appreciate a subscription. Thank you.